Good afternoon, everyone. This is Elaine Grohman on Earth Wisdom Circles on Empower Radio. Today, as we know, we're in many crises around the world, and it is an absolute joy and honor to bring our next guest, my next guest, Bebe Schaefer, who is a junior at American University in Washington, D.C. And Bebe has a major in communications, legal studies, economics, and government, but with a minor in critical race gender studies of the societies within America. And I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to help her showcase what she's working on, which is an amazing and very important project in the nonprofit realm called Water End. So welcome to the show, Bebe.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank
So
you.
excited to be here.
So first of all, I want to ask you and congratulate you and yourself and the other young women that you're working with to really step forward and to talk about this important issue, the concern, because as we know, we cannot live without water.
Absolutely.
So tell me, please, and tell us, what is the impetus for you having started Water And? What does the name mean? And what are you doing currently?
Yeah, that's such a fantastic question. So, Water And was really started after I was a part of a previous nonprofit, and I discovered that the things that nonprofit was doing was a little bit different than what I wanted to end up doing. And so I basically said, I've gained the skills in this past role that I was in to create my own nonprofit and create my own organization. And then I basically went to my friends with this radical idea of, let's start an organization that we can build community through water, because we know that in the midst of climate change, in the midst of everything, so little attention is being paid to water when it deserves so much more attention. And it's the common denominator of all life, right? So I went to my friends with this crazy idea, guys, let's start a nonprofit. Let's, do it from the beginning in March 2021. And yeah, it started that way. So Water And, which is water ampersand, is significance of future and forward. Ampersand is future, moving forward together, and we wanted to put water at the beginning of that. So when we were going through names, we were like, and water, but the first thing that came to my mind is like, but it's water and everything else. We need water for everything else. And so we decided that, water is the future. It's the past, present, future. It's everything. And so that is really where the name came from. And our incredible logo was created by Aubrey Frost, who is our content creator on our team. And she drew it out from the very beginning. And it has always held a special place in all of our hearts to know that it was, created by her and not something that we had commissioned someone else to do, because it means that it stayed within our team and represents who we are.
I think it's beautiful too, because it's elegant and it speaks to the power of water and the beauty of water. So tell me, once you approach these other young women, are they all students at American University with you?
Yeah, so the majority of them are. So we have Rachel Roberts, who is our PR and communications lead. We have Aubrey, who I already mentioned, content creation. We have Sam Winters, who's dealing with digital media, and she has been spearheading our investigative journalism series. We have Sophie Stowe, who is doing internal affairs. So she's kind of like my right-hand woman in terms of figuring out, strategy and moving forward. And then we have Caitlin Lemessurier, who actually is the only person that doesn't go to American University. She happened to discover us through LinkedIn, and she is an incredible asset to our team as well. She graduated a year early from Cornell, and she's currently working in Alaska, in Ketchikan, Alaska, with one of the tribes over there. And so she has been incredible. But yes, it's all young women, young, 20-year-old people, and yeah, they've been a joy to work with.
So tell me there's so much attention and usually the attention on water is when there's a crisis.
Yeah,
as we know, certainly in Michigan, you having grown up in Michigan, me living in Michigan, that, the Flint water crisis is a global shame.
absolutely.
But it is not the only place that this is happening. So tell me what is different about what you're doing at Water and what kind of collaborative work are you hoping to move forward in this conversation about really working without animosity and really working for a common goal?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So one of the first things that we did at Water and, which I think really has made all the difference, is we're a horizontal led organization. That means that no one is above one another. We have no hierarchy. We believe that everyone is equal and everyone has equal say. And that means that as a team, we are really able to work towards a common goal where we don't feel that one side is being pushed more than another. And I think that that has been a really beautiful thing.
Mm.
Um, in terms of the Flint water crisis, well, we know that was an absolute blunder, fault of everyone involved. And so I think that what we're really trying to do differently is look at these issues through an environmental justice lens. And when I say environmental justice, I really want to define that in the sense that critical race scholar David Pello defined environmental justice as places where you live, work, play. So it's not just the great outdoors, right? It's your home, your school, wherever you spend the most amount of time. And so we also know that the majority of environmental justice issues affect communities of color the most because they are the ones that are not given um, attention and the political push to be able to get their issues heard, right? And so a lot of these water crises that we're seeing are mainly happening in poor communities of color. So specifically in DC, Northeast DC is constantly under a boil water advisory, as well as Anacostia, which is the poorest ward in DC, which is Ward 8. And then in Michigan, obviously, we know Benton Harbor is facing a disaster at the moment.
Yes.
And that is interesting because about 20 miles away or so is a 94% white community that is not facing any of the same issues. And so we wonder in this sense, like these issues are clearly targeting a certain group of people. And it's people that lack political power and people that don't have a voice. And so that is really what we're trying to focus on at Water and is identifying communities and ways that we can get involved to help um, curb these issues, right? And when we say curb these issues, that means going a step further from giving water out and being able to provide them with clean water. That means we're really looking at ways to end privatization of water. And this is an ongoing research project that we have going. And so when we discuss decommodification and water, I think it really comes down to this is in Flint, Michigan, when the Flint water crisis was going on 200 miles away in Evert, Michigan, that is where Flint was filling their bottled water. And they were able to do that to then give to Flint residents on top of Flint residents having to pay for their own water that they could not use. And so that is a huge problem. These communities are already poor, they're already hurting, and they're dealing with a crisis that their life depends on, right? We all need water.
And
And on top
also,
of
if I
that,
may, and if I, excuse me for interrupting, but they
yeah,
also are dealing with a problem they did not create.
exactly.
So what is, I
Exactly.
think, important is we have to get away from the blame game, but
Absolutely.
rather ask companies, because companies are made of people, to be accountable for
Absolutely.
maybe what they as individuals did not personally sanction, but
Hmm.
the company globally did. And
Yeah,
so how do we address with integrity things
absolutely.
that have been kind of glossed over in the past so that we hold ourselves and our businesses and our leadership accountable in the best possible way,
Yes.
that they want to do the right thing. And as you had
Yeah.
mentioned, you know, there was recently, it was on Netflix. I can't remember. I believe it was called Rotten, a series on
Hmm.
Netflix that
Yes.
spoke about, yes, many companies are making a tremendous profit on something that comes out of a tap from municipalities anyways. And there is
Absolutely.
a very huge and terrible things that have happened to people whose waters were being protected. As
Yep,
indigenous people, were protecting the sacredness of water,
absolutely.
not just the economic value of water.
Absolutely. So some of the ways that we're really approaching this question, which I 100% agree with you, I think we have some of the main reasons why Water Ann was created is because we are in the midst of some of the most polarized times ever. Obviously, I'm 20 years old, so I haven't lived through many years of life, but as I've seen from history and people that I've spoken to, this is a really scary time in the sense that, where does truth stop and start? Where can we get good information from? These are questions that we're asking, right? And so Water and was also really created with the intention of creating community through polarization. If water is our common denominator and it is the thing that connects all life, that is such an integral part of our world, um, we see water as the ability for us to connect and build community through her. And I use she her pronouns, and you can look at that more on our website. But we believe that water is inherently feminine. It gives and births life, and so do women, and females. And so we do call water she and her pronouns and identify her as a uh, feminine source of life. And so, back to your question about addressing these issues of integrity, what we have found really works is our Instagram is at Water and Why. And we think that that is perfect because what we tend to do is ask questions. So if we're looking at a lot of these issues, it's really difficult to call a big business out and be like, you're creating a mess. You could potentially have a lawsuit on your hands. There are a lot of legal implications and consequences that can follow. And so what we have found is asking questions has been so effective. So when it came to, I'm sure many of you have heard about Stephen Donziger. He was a lawyer working for the Ecuadorian people in the midst of Chevron dumping in their water. And Stephen was recently just sent to jail after being on house arrest for hundreds of days. And some of the questions that we asked in one of our articles is, when does human life begin to be valued more than money? Like where can we create conversations where there is none, and how can we do so by being curious and not asserting blame? And so I think that's one of the things that we have found works really well, in the sense that we are Water and Why on social media, because social media is the place where we want to start conversations and start asking questions and begin to delve deeper into these topics with whoever is our audience on social media. But also, again, being very careful not to assert blame and make sure that we are being um, or having integrity towards our community and the people that we speak about.
Well, I really appreciate that. And again, my guest is Bebe Schaefer, and she is the founder of Water and. As a junior at American University in Washington, D.C., she has gathered a group of individuals together, women in particular, to really talk honestly and openly and with a heartfelt understanding that there's many situations that have to be mitigated, that have to be solved, that have to be corrected, and we have to learn how to do this um, with integrity, because there's so much fear that's involved, and there's so much negative rhetoric. And so I want to ask you, Bebe, how are you trying to direct a conversation in, as we know in social media, there's so much direction of negativity. How are you trying to rise above that as water rises? How are you rising above that collectively?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think social media, especially as we've seen in the past few months, especially post election, it's really been a place for toxic behavior. A lot of people are creating really negative narratives and making it really scary for people online. And some of the ways that we're really trying to fix that is all of our content is original. We take beautiful photos of water through Aubrey. She's amazing and has been taking these incredible photos. And so some of the ways that we really like to lighten up the conversation is by centering people. And so showing those photos of water, at least for me, it's always helped ground me. I know that, when I'm having a bad day, for example, I always, turn to water. Or when it's raining, so many people are like, oh, it's raining. It's such bad weather. It's such a bad day, and I really turned that around and, I'm thankful for the rain coming out of the clouds and the sky. And I think that when it comes to dissolving the toxicity on social media, that really means starting with where can we find common ground, as I already mentioned, but also where can we find mindfulness and grounding. And some of the ways that we've also tried to do that is our social media is not just investigative journalism. It's not just asking these questions. Kaylin just composed a beautiful anthology on Indigenous perspectives on water that's on our website. And we really do this by trying to find beautiful poetry that embodies what we're trying to talk about, and what we believe. And so art and imaginative futures is really something that we've hinged a lot of our audience on and what we're doing, because art and poetry and music, it has a way to reach people rather than just information, right?
Yes.
And so that's really something that we've been doing that we feel sets us apart and is, it's huge. I think personally, art has always been a way that I am able to see a different side of the world. And with Water and using art is really another intention of creating a broader community, but also being able for people to interpret their own definitions of water, and what that looks like, right? And so using art as a way to do that, we have found to be super effective, but also to even more so build community in places that sometimes information and research isn't always super accessible to all people. And so we found that other methods like art and poetry have been great ways to reach people.
So that's beautiful. And tell me, what has been your response from individuals who are just learning about what you're doing, perhaps organizations or municipalities or whomever it is? What is the feedback that you're getting from them?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be invited to the Israeli embassy to talk about climate and water at a student roundtable. And I was surrounded by some of the most passionate people ever. I didn't even know half these people went to my university. I was, genuinely shocked when I attended, just because, when you go to class every day, you don't realize it, right? And so some of the I mean, honestly, all of the responses that we've been getting, it's just like, this is beautiful, this is incredible, like, good for you, like, kudos to you. When I started the organization, I was 19, and I had multiple people be like, there's no way you're 19, like, there's no way. I think that's another issue in our society, and that we don't believe that young people are capable of doing great things.
Mhm.
And so it's been great to hear the feedback. Honestly, I've heard so many people, that I'm like, oh, like, I started this organization, and they're like, oh my God, what? Like, let me follow. Like, I want to be a part of it. And I never expected the amount of support that I have been getting. I think that my team, one, has been incredible, a huge support system, of course. And we work so well together. But on top of that, all of our resources from our friends at school and other people that I've spoken to about it. It's just people are super excited. They want to get involved. And I just think it's a really cool way to view things. I think it's a little bit different. Oftentimes, when we talk about water, it's often in business terms, and what that means for economic value and infrastructure and stormwater, which is all super important. But I think what we're really trying to do is really get at the nitty gritty of it, right? Like, what is at the center of all of this? It's that we need water to survive. It's our common denominator. It's what keeps us together as living beings. And so that's what we really wanted to utilize to approach water. And I think
Mm.
we've done an excellent job at that.
So, Bibi, tell me how, thank you for that. It was beautifully stated. Tell me how your professors are responding to this, because I'm sure that they're closely looking at what you're doing and encouraged by the fact that you're really stepping into this position of leadership and inviting others to do the same.
Yeah. I had a professor last year who I took a climate change course actually. And I noticed throughout the course that so much of it had to do with carbon emissions, net zero. It's all super important. You know, these are essential things to keeping our world intact as it is. And I realized that a lot of the conversation really did leave out water. You know, talked a lot about rising sea levels, glaciers melting, keeping the degrees under 1.5, at 1.5 or less. And so I went up to him at the end of class. I was like, hey, this is amazing. I've learned so much, but I want to know a little bit more about this conversation. Like, how can I learn more about water? Where can I find that niche in this field of study? And he ended up connecting me with a graduate student that provided us a bunch of materials to help us get our research started. And so that professor was incredible. Todd Eisenstadt at American University is fantastic. I've been speaking to my professor, Dr. Elizabeth Rule, who is a member of the Chickasaw Nation, and she has been absolutely phenomenal in helping me get this off the ground, but also to identify her tribe is the Chickasaw Nation, the Chickasaws' perspectives on water. And I think that has been super helpful. Truthfully, American University is such a passionate community, right? And so when you talk to anyone about these issues and the efforts to fix these issues, people are so excited to get involved. But when I think about, you know, my professors specifically, there are a lot of professors that I would want to reach out to that I haven't yet. And I think, you know, that is with school for sure. It's gotten busy. But I think asking that question really gave me the incentive to email some people that I definitely should be reaching out to about it.
Well, that's good. Well, you can't do everything at once, so you have to kind of pace yourself, even though you want
Right.
to, because you want to have the information kind of settle in people. I think, you know, that
Absolutely.
you want to. I believe, as a writer and as an educator myself, I realize that sometimes people are resistant to change because they don't understand how we're inherently been taught that we protect ourselves from what we don't want to know or what we don't want to be accountable for. And I think that we're in this age of awareness where we recognize we absolutely have to be accountable. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be against one another and say you're right and you're wrong. It's a leveling. The truth of the subject is that we cannot live without water. We cannot live without this earth. And it's interesting, as you said, to talk about glaciers melting and water or sea levels rising. Well, that is water itself. So
Absolutely.
you can't separate it from itself. So, as any nonprofit, the big challenge that you have is funding. So,
Yes.
how are you able to get any funding, or are you just kind of doing on a shoestring at this point? Um,
Um,
and how might people help you?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So right now we are in the process of filing for 501(c)(3) status. So we are getting the ball rolling on that. For a while at the beginning, we were trying to figure out when was the perfect time to apply. And I think recently we just kind of realized with so many people wanting to help and the outpouring of support that we just need to get the legal paperwork in to be able to start having funding and also for more people to want to get involved, right? And I also want to mention that getting involved doesn't just mean economically, it means following our social medias, it means being interested in what we're doing. And we are going to start having a newsletter that goes out, so signing up for that. Obviously, not everyone has the economic accessibility to give. And so we want to make sure that you can still be a part of the organization without giving. But in terms of funding, um, personally, a lot of it has recently been coming out of my own personal pockets and the people in my team. Um, it hasn't been super large of an expense yet, simply because of the fact that we're mainly operating as an informational platform at the moment on social media and through our website. But I believe that when we start getting into these projects, like the ones that we want to start doing in water privatization and decommodification, that is definitely going to need some funding, as well as our investigative journalism series that has been going super, super well. I know that if we want to get some more, on the ground interviews and being able to really enter these communities and be able to talk to them and hear their perspective, which is super, super important to the conversation, that is definitely going to need some funding. But I will definitely, keep everyone posted on when we can actually start accepting funding, because I think that might be a little while, in terms of being involved,
Hopefully it
financially
won't
through.
be that long.
Yes, I'm really praying. Hopefully the legal process goes quicker than I anticipated.
Oh, good. And I
Yeah,
think, Bibi, that what you're saying is I always want people to be encouraged and aware of the fact it's very easy to sit back on the sidelines and say, well, look at what they're doing. Isn't it great?
yeah,
But water is not just where you are.
right.
We people can begin to, at the very least, and this is not minimizing it in any way, is to understand how precious water is to their personal life. If I
Yeah,
think if any one individual attempted for just one day to get through a day and just witness how often they're interacting with water
yeah,
and how we have been so accustomed to its presence that we can often forget its importance, and see what would happen if you intentionally did not grab a glass and turn on your tap. Where would you go? How would you make your coffee, your tea, create your food? How would you clean your body? How would you clean your home? How would you water your plants? How would you do anything?
absolutely.
So
That
I think that
really,
it's important to bring it to people's attention in just an experience that they create for themselves honestly, so that the
absolutely.
appreciation is more heartfelt.
So some of the ways that we're really kind of looking at combating this is World Water Day is coming up on March 22nd, which is super exciting. It's November 22nd, so we are a few months out, but time goes by so quickly that we are just around the corner, right? And some of the ways that we're really looking at this is kind of looking at how we can do a day without water. So being involved with our community members and other people that want to film videos of them going through their day without using water, without having access to water, and really seeing how those days are completely changed. And whether that's through art, video, writing, poetry, any way that people want to get involved. That is something that's in the works. We're still trying to figure out like a good, catchy name for it. We are thinking a day without water, but obviously, we want to make it a little bit unique to our organization to be able to bring in other partners and other people that want to get involved. And so that is something that we're really looking at, right? Because it's such an important issue, right? If we wake up in the morning and we are getting out of our bed, those sheets were made because water exists, right? We are going to drink a glass of water when we get out of bed because our throats are parched and dry after sleeping all night. We need water. Exactly. We need to brush our teeth. We need to wear clothes. We need to use our cars, if we drive. And so, these are all really important things. And so being able to look at a day without water is really something that we're super interested in, because I think once you take away that essential part of your day, you realize how different things are. And people don't realize it, as you said, because we take it for granted. I've grown up in Michigan my whole life, except for when I moved to DC in 2019 to go to school at American University, and I was surrounded by 5 Great Lakes. I never worried about not having water. That was never a concern for me. And for all of my life, I think, until I really got into this work even more, I took it for granted. I think that my favorite question is, why are you passionate about water? When I get people involved in our organization, when we speak about water in team building exercises or anything, that's my first question. Why are you passionate about water? What is it that makes you passionate about water? And the amount of people that have said to me, "Oh, I love drinking water," um, and we think that that is such like a small way to approach it, but it really is so important because our bodies need water, right? It's essential to our bodies and its movements and the way that it functions. And as small as drinking water is every day, and we think it's so small, it really is huge. Without water, we'd be dehydrated, we'd be sick,
Right.
we'd be, ill. And so again, like it's super important that we focus in on that, and we want to try to find ways that we can bring it even more to the public's attention.
Yes.
Um,
And I
so
think
that
that
is something that we're working on.
I think it's also important to recognize that and it's very insightful that you use the term passion. And what in great teachings of the past, they understand that emotions and water are literally one and the same because we emote, we have tears, we everything. Water is within everything. We think about the air as separate, but water is in the air. Water is in the land. The land cannot be land without water. The air cannot be air without water. We cannot have respirations without water. And so it is intrinsically a part of everything that exists. It is not separate from anything, nor could it ever possibly be. So I think
Absolutely.
that that's really important to recognize that, we flow with emotions when we're happy. We're stifled when we're angry. We're frozen when we're in pain. And so there's so many literally metaphors that are genuine representations of what water does and does for us.
Absolutely.
So how have you seen this awareness change you personally? How have you seen that um, preceding working with water, how this has opened your horizons, not just intellectually, but in other ways?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I love this question. I don't think I've ever been asked to actually articulate that before. But I will say, so I've always been involved in activism and advocacy from a very young age. It began with gun violence and starting Students Demand Action chapters at my high school. I've always been someone that has never been able to just sit still in the midst of injustice. It's a blessing and a plague at the same time, but it is something that has always been super unique to me. And I feel like as soon as I entered the work of water, I became so much more in touch with my divine feminine. I began to notice my intuition more. I began to be more appreciative of everything that life gives me. And I felt more emotional, more in tune. Growing up, I always had this mentality of, on to the next thing. Like you have to just keep going, right? I was never super able to live in my emotion and to be able to express that within myself and to other people. And I think working in water has been able to give me that sense of I can be emotional and still be strong, and I can even more
Mhm.
so, I can be even stronger because I'm emotional. That's a whole level to people that we often forget about. And I think water embodies that so well in the sense that she can be vicious and cause hurricanes and, you know, tsunamis, but she can also be the pond that you see on your walk, right? And I think that there is that duality that exists for me has shown me even more so what it means to work in water, but also what it means to be a part of water and within the life cycle of water. Um, and that means that when I look at every person, regardless of their background or where they come from, it's, we are the same because we all began from this the starting point, right? Um, and I think that when I think about the way that my life has been changed through water, I think it really comes down to how can I live my life for other people and not just for myself. I
Mm.
have never found value in only doing things for me. And my goal every day is to leave the world better than I found it. And I see water as the way that I can do that, while also being appreciative of water and all that she gives me and all that she gives everyone else. So that's
That's a
a great question.
beautiful answer, and I see that transformation within you, and I have the pleasure of knowing you. And so, um, a phrase was said to me a number of years ago that always sticks within my mind, and it is, the solution to pollution is dilution, which is very much speaking about water. And as what that came to mind when you just stated about the veracity that water can have. But when there is a tsunami, when there is a storm, there's also a clearing out. There's also an opportunity that life has given us to say, how well are we working with the environments in which we live, or how are we trying to be arrogant, if I could say that, and try to control what doesn't need control. It needs to be worked with and to be studied, so that we understand how this brilliant experience called life has maintained life for countless millennium. And
Yeah,
there is something significant in watching what is working rather than trying to control what we inevitably break. And so I
yeah,
think that I really congratulate you and all the women that you're working with, um, for doing what you're doing and having, as you'd mentioned, working with another organization. Sometimes we have to go through challenging times to see for ourselves and to have something crystallized for us what is working here and what is not working here. Not to be
totally.
judgmental, but to say, perhaps there's a better way, and I want to
Yeah,
use that rather than fight against the going against the river. There's a phrase, going against the river. You will
yeah,
never get anywhere if you're going against the river.
I
Only if
totally
you're
agree.
spawning and you're a fish and you're preparing to die, but literally preparing to die in order to give birth.
Yeah. I think that we really saw this come to light during COVID. Specifically, I think although COVID was an absolute disaster, as you know, the response, the amount of people that died, which is so horrible, and I'm so sorry to all of those families. But what we really saw during COVID is an immediate stop of the world. The world finally said for a second, let's just be here now, just stop what you're doing, stop the craziness, stop the constant competition. I have to be better than you, I have to surpass you, and sit at home and be with your family and find hobbies that you never thought you would ever find, because you never thought you would have the time to pursue any of them, um, and take the time to appreciate the life that you have. And although in the midst of the political polarization that we faced during this time, which was absolutely massive, and I'm sure um, was incredibly difficult for everyone, as well as the racial injustices that we saw that occurred during this time with George Floyd and the protests, we also saw a new era of activism and support for life. And when I say support for life, I really mean the people that would normally be working 40-hour work weeks because of COVID were able to go to protests and fight for what they believe. And the people that were posting on social media all of these things, we really saw the curtain come off on the world in terms of we were able to hide things behind the surface for so long because you were all so distracted in whatever was going on. And I think at this point in 2020 specifically, it was this moment of wow, there are so many things that we need to focus on. There's so much work that needs to be done. There's so many ways that we can make the world better. And that starts with us. That starts with building community. That starts with being with our families. And although COVID was an absolute disaster, the sense of being able to pause was such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I hope that the people that spent the time being able to do so are utilizing that. I know, at least for me, like being able to take that time to pause in the midst of my busy schedule as being a full time student and doing everything else that I'm doing, um, it gave me the ability to take a hard look at my life, like you said, and what is workable? What can we do better? How can we improve? And how can we stop controlling the things that we can't control, and be okay with that? And being able to let go was something for me that I struggled with my whole life. I think it's something that I will always struggle with. It's just the person that I am. And it's both, you know, beautiful in the sense that we all share this, innate struggle to better ourselves and to better the people around us, but also to recognize when things just need to be. And that's something that I always struggled with and something that COVID really helped me come to terms with. So, as I said, although it was disastrous, I think there were a lot of positives. And when it comes to water specifically, I think we really saw the curtain come off on a lot of the racial justice issues and the intersection of water and access that are going on, specifically in a lot of Indigenous communities under boil water advisory alerts and other issues like that, where water sovereignty and water protection was so absolutely essential to the work that they did, and that they continue to do. And yet, oil companies and other big organizations have basically come in and said, we want to build on top of that, right? But COVID forced us to stop all of that and just be. And although a lot of it has started to continue again, a lot of it has stopped, and there's absolute celebration in that as well.
Yes, and I think, thank you for sharing that, because I think that what we need to look at as this gift of COVID is that we are being given, whether we take it or not is another thing, but we are given the opportunity for self-examination. We are given the opportunity to really reflect upon the fact that many systems have been intentionally set in place to create a vast divide. And none of us, not a single human on this planet, is intelligent enough to make one atom. And that we have, in the past 2,000 years or more, literally coming out of what's called the Piscean age and now into the age of Aquarius, which is the age of the water bearers, is how do we look at these systems that have literally separated our own minds and separated us intentionally from life. And if our own mind is not balanced, if our own mind does not know how to appreciate and discern the information within emotions, then we will fight an internal battle that will create many psychological challenges that did not need to be there. And yes, there are some unfortunate individuals who have a hereditary factor of psychological imbalances, but most of our psychological imbalances have been imposed upon us in our thinking.
Absolutely.
And we have to learn how to actually use this great gift that we have of our emotions and our mind. And to know that there's a reason that all of the human race has various colors of skin. And the only reason is because where our lives started on this planet. And so when we look at and examine and step away from organizations that have intentionally divided us, then we will reunify ourselves in our own minds. Divide and conquer is an old phrase that was, if you divide a mind, you have conquered the person. And that could be an individual, that could be a family, that could be a community. But division is very dangerous. And the one who upholds the division the most is the one who will unfortunately be damaged the most. And that we see it all around us. And it is not meant to be that way. It's meant to help us all say, yes, maybe I did something that I shouldn't have done, or maybe I have participated in judging others or keeping water from somebody, or food from somebody, or shelter from somebody. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, how do we change this? Not why did we do it? Because we'll never know the nuances of all that has divided us, religion in particular, governments in particular, which were led by religious organizations. We see that everywhere in the world. But religion is not life. It is an ideology of separation of one better than the other. And that is being seen for what it is.
Yeah. My dad said the best thing to me. I think it was a couple years ago. I was probably complaining about, something having to do with my family or one of my friends. And I was like, why don't they do this the way that I do it? That was my mindset of like, that was the right way to do it. Right. And, my dad sat me down and goes, we're all in a lake, we're all in a body of water, and we're all floating. And some people have floaties, some people have a boat, some people are drowning, some people, but we're all in this body of water together, and we all are living life together. And that's what brings us together, right? Everyone has different ways of getting from point A to point B, or figuring out ways to change their, if they don't want to be in the body of water, they had a boat, but that doesn't neglect the fact that we all start the same way, and we all end the same way. And so that point A to point B, the journey in between, matters only as much as it does to that individual person and the people that they surround themselves with, because regardless of what they choose to do in that journey, we're all going to end the same way. And so in my view, and what I believe, that if we stop viewing this journey in the middle as a sense of competition, that we have to be better than everyone else, that we have to, beat whatever is going on around us. It's how can we, if we start point A all together in the body of water, and we end all together in the body of water, what is stopping us in this journey of spending that time together and realizing that we are so connected? And what is the purpose of our lives? And for me, as I said previously, that I found that's helping people, that's building community. And I find that is the most beautiful way that I can give back to my community, but also that everyone else can as well.
Well, it's I thank you for what you just said, because and your dad was very wise in trying to help you understand that. And what came to me as you were speaking, a boat has no value if there is no water.
Right.
You can only drown because you're in water. You can only swim because you've learned how to work with water. But that is this illusion that we have, that because we have in our minds some separation in a boat, capacity to swim or not, instead of making it everyone working together with this gift called water.
Right.
And it's really a time for us to really begin to look at everything. Why are we even here as human beings? What is it we are being given an opportunity to really, really look at with very clear vision of what has humanity alone done to damage this planet? There is not a single creature, living creature, not a plant, not an animal, that has ever done one destructive thing to this planet. It is only the animals called humus, means of the earth. We are of the earth. We are beings of the earth. That's what it means to be a human being. a being of the earth. So all of that, which took beyond our understanding in terms of time, to make all of these things, to have all of these living presences be possible, so that we can have a life, and we make the mistake of believing that this is my life, this is Bebe's life. No, we are alive because of life. We are participating with life. It's not a singular process, no matter how much one tries to make it that in their mind. They will separate themselves from life itself.
Absolutely.
So go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, just super quick, like growing up in the way that I grew up for whatever reason, I always viewed that like you live alone and you die alone, like I said, right, initially, with the floating water analogy. So why does it matter about the beginning, about the middle? Like you only have yourself to depend on. And as I've grown up and I've become more in touch with water and I have been able to be surrounded by incredible people in my life, I've realized that the reason why I am the way that I am is because I'm surrounded by the people I am. And so it doesn't matter what I choose to do to get to point A to point B. It's the people around me that allow me to get there. And the more and more that we view ourselves as connected to the people around us as we do to our own selves and our own emotions and our own psyche, the better the world will be.
Yeah, and the world is fractured when people separate themselves.
Yeah.
In small, seemingly small ways or in enormous ways.
Yeah.
And so, Bebe, tell us about your website and where people can go to reach out to you and your team.
Yeah, for sure. So our website is www.water, waterand.org. So waterand.org. And we have a contact us page on our website, as well as our email is water. If you go to the contact us, our email is waterandwhy with 2 y's at gmail.com. And so that is where you can reach out to us if you have anything that you would like to say, as well as be connected and find out ways to get involved. We would love that.
Do you put out a newsletter so if people sign up, they could get newsletter or get information from you?
Yeah, so we're actually in the process of starting a newsletter. So we don't have one yet, but we are starting one because we've been putting out some awesome information on our educational page. We just reviewed the COP26 conference and its downfalls in the water, in water specifically. It talked so much about climate, but not nearly enough attention was paid to water, although it is so intrinsically connected. And so we did something on that. We are looking at the Kenya water crisis potential solutions, the anthology on Indigenous views of water, the Benton Harbor water crisis, and we're even looking at the UN Sustainable Development Goals and looking at how each of these goals, although they seem so separate from water, are so connected to water, right? So good health and well-being. If our water is dirty, that's a health crisis. If gender equality, women are spending hours fetching water and not getting an education, can't go to school if they don't have the proper sanitation for their menstrual cycle. And so this is another huge part of it. Even industry, I mean, hydropower is something that we rely on. And so although we tend to view the UN Sustainable Development Goals in a box, in the sense that it only relates to what exactly it is, because water is so interconnected with everything else. We have utilized the UN Sustainable Development Goals to then say water is so connected to everything else, and this is why this goal relates to water and why we should care about it. And so that is just some of the work that we're doing. We have our Streamline series, which is the Michigan City Assist Another Flint and the Kenya water crisis that Samantha Winters has been focusing on, and she's been amazing. We have some other really incredible work that's coming out soon, which I cannot wait to share, as well as looking at the intrinsic value of water. That post should go out today. And so yeah, this is our team.
I look forward to being able to bring you back on the show and talking about all that you're doing. And I want to just, we use the term, we throw around the term crisis. There's two ways of looking at a crisis, and there's two opportunities to move forward. Some crises are man-made. Those are the ones that we really have to stop creating crises, because then there are real and life-changing crises like hurricanes and rising water levels and temperatures. That those are the real crises that we have to look at, and we have to learn how to stop creating the crises just for economic reasons. Because
Absolutely.
no matter who you are, and if you're a part of creating the crisis, it will eventually affect your life or those that are your descendants. So no one can honestly step away from a crisis and say, this does not affect me.
And if we're only focusing on money, then what is there to be left when there's no money to be made and no earth to call our home? So
That's right. That's right. So again, if we have just 2 minutes left, so Bebe, would you please just give us those numbers again, or those contact information again?
yeah. So our Instagram is water and y at WATERANDY WHY. So that is going to be our Instagram, and our social media links, which is going to be Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And then we are on LinkedIn as well as at water and. My personal LinkedIn is /BEBESCHAEFER. And you can connect with us through that. And then our email is water and y with 2 Y's. So WATERANDWHYY at gmail.com. And then obviously our website is waterand.org. So please, please, please reach out if you would love to get involved. We would love to have you as a part of our community and for us to learn through you. So that would be incredible for the people watching this if you would like to contact us and get involved.
Well, thank you so much, Bebe. And again, my guest today has been Bebe Schaefer. As a young woman going to university at American University in Washington, D.C. in her third year, never underestimate what a 20-year-old can do. And today is her 20th birthday, so happy birthday. And I look forward to seeing what you're doing, and I applaud what you're doing. I'm really proud of you. And I get to say that I'm proud of her because she's my niece. So I can honestly say that. So happy birthday. Thank you for what you're doing and encouraging other people. This is really important. This is Elaine Grohman on Earth Wisdom Circles on Empower Radio. And I encourage you to look at your world and see where you can begin to understand our beautiful earth, the wisdom it takes, and to understand we all live in circles. We are all connected. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And happy Thanksgiving, everyone.